Did you know that Aquaman was one of the very first superheroes to ever get his own TV show? The 1950s saw the debut of The Adventures of Superman, the very first TV show based on a comic book superhero. During the 60s, Marvel also got into TV with the anthology show Marvel Superheroes and also Spider-Man's first ever animated show. DC, on the other hand, worked alongside animation studio Filmation to produce a series of cartoons based on their comic books, and one of the first animated series that they ever produced were based on Superman and Aquaman, paired up in the Superman/Aquaman Hour of Adventure. So, as you can see, Aquaman is one of the very first comic book characters to ever get his own animated series and TV show in general. Just for perspective, not even Wonder Woman or The Flash have ever had their own animated series, and yet Aquaman has. For as much as some people like to make fun of the character, and despite years of being used as a joke in pop culture, he's still undeniably one of the most popular and recognizable superheroes of all time. So it's really no surprise that he has many cancelled, unmade, and obscure TV and movie projects that never saw the light of day. One such project was an animated series of shorts that actually plays into the stereotype of Aquaman being a lame joke character, and it did air on TV, but you might not remember it because it didn't originally air in the United States. Back in 2003, Cartoon Network Latin America started airing during commercial breaks a series of shorts called Aquaman y sus amigos, or by its English title, The Aquaman and Friends Action Hour, a series comprised of 7 5-minute shorts that focus on Aquaman being the host of a kids' TV show, while the Legion of Doom plot to assassinate him. And man, if you know Spanish, the entire thing is really funny.
¿Están listos para cantar? Y uno y dos y...
Now it's time to sing a song about happy things and puppies.
During the 90s and early 2000s, there was a trend of sorts, with Cartoon Network and Adult Swim making shows that were parodies of old Hanna-Barbera cartoons. Shows like Space Ghost Coast to Coast, Sea-Lab 2021, and Harvey Birdman all played into that. And these Aquaman shorts have a very similar feel with how surreal, irreverent, and satirical they are. The humor is very sarcastic. And before these Aquaman shorts, I remember that Cartoon Network even did a commercial bumper about Brainiac just wanting some pants.
Mira, lo único que quiero son pantalones, unos buenos pantalones!
These shorts serve as a parody of the Super Friends, a classic cartoon from the 70s that really helped in popularizing the Justice League and DC's heroes in pop culture. However, it was also during the Super Friends where Aquaman gained his bad reputation and people started considering him lame. The joke mainly comes from Aquaman being kinda useless during most Super Friends episodes because they had to involve water for him to be useful, something that really doesn't happen in the comics because Aquaman is a lot more powerful than just being completely dependent on water. But on the Super Friends, this wasn't really translated well, and so general audiences just considered him to be useless and lame. And that became the character's reputation within pop culture for years after. And even though this might seem like a bad thing at first, I don't really think it was that much of an issue, because even though Aquaman got popular for being ridiculed and considered to be lame, he's still undeniably one of the most popular and recognizable comic book characters ever. And all of the made and unmade TV and movie projects that were created based on Aquaman are a testament to just how popular and recognizable the character is. As we mentioned, Aquaman was one of the very first superheroes to get his own TV show in the 1960s, but despite how recognizable the character is, he still took a lot of time before getting a new TV series focused on him. In the 80s, the first attempt at a live-action Aquaman adaptation actually came from a couple of film students. Thomas Farr and Jeff Kleen were students from UCLA, and in 1984, for a budget of $10,000 and with the permission from DC Comics, they created a movie called Aquaman: The Cast of the Angler, a fan film that felt similar in style to the Adam West Batman show, but with Aquaman instead. And the short movie was received so positively that it won a couple of awards, and in the years after, the movie ended up being pirated and pitched to TV networks as a pilot for a potential series starring Aquaman. And according to Thomas Farr, there were many networks, such as New World Pictures, approached him and Jeff Kleen in order to discuss the possibility of making an Aquaman series, but it never happened in the end. Even though this Aquaman fan film didn't evolve into an official TV show, this wasn't the last time that an Aquaman live-action TV series was attempted. Back in 2006, the creators of Smallville, Al Gough and Miles Millar, started developing a solo Aquaman series for the WB after the positive reception of a season 6 episode from Smallville titled Aqua. In that episode, Arthur Curry was played by Alan Richardson. But for the pilot, Gough and Millar chose to recast the character in order to separate it from Smallville, and so they casted Justin Hartley, the same actor who would go on to play Green Arrow later on in Smallville, but he actually played Aquaman on this proposed series first. The pilot focuses on Arthur Curry's origin in his formative years, long before he became Aquaman, showing how as a kid, he was on a plane crash with his mother when they were flying over the Bermuda Triangle, with his mother Atlana being attacked and captured by a siren. Years later, the show takes us to Arthur's life as a young adult, and he goes by AC on the show. He's living in Tempest Key, where he works as a bartender and lives near his adoptive father, Tom Curry, who's a Coast Guard and tries to help Arthur with his problems with the law and the underwater threats that start to appear in their town, because the same siren that attacked his mother when he was young reappears in Tempest Key in order to attack Arthur. She even kills one of Arthur's friends, and she's a real menacing threat throughout the pilot. It seems like these underwater threats were being set up as the recurring conflict of the show, much like how Smallville used its meteor shower as an excuse to use as a common backstory as to how most of the villains of the week got their metahuman powers. It seems like the common excuse for the potential villains of this show was going to be that they were hunting down Arthur, all while he's being assisted by a mysterious Atlantean named McCaffrey, who would have guided Arthur into becoming Aquaman and learning about his Atlantean heritage. This potential pilot was reportedly well received by audiences, but the show was developing around the time that the WB and UPN networks merged, which resulted in a new TV channel called the CW being created, and its executives ultimately passed on the show, and it was actually put up for digital purchase on iTunes after its rejection for people to openly buy and see. And even though it received a mostly positive fan reaction, it still didn't help in getting the show greenlit. So as we can see from both this obscure fan film and this rejected CW pilot, Warner has considered multiple times the possibility of adapting Aquaman into live action. And after the popularity boom in superhero films from the early 2000s, it was natural that they started seriously considering making an Aquaman movie. The earliest reports that we have on the internet about a potential film comes all the way back from 2001, when some unsubstantiated rumors were reported on a magazine that actors Monica Porter and Kiefer Sutherland were in the discussion stage to star in an Aquaman film. Later on in 2004, multiple news outlets reported that producers Alan and Peter Ritchie were trying to move forward a potential Aquaman movie with a script from screenwriter Ben Grant. Years later, during 2007, Warner Brothers was developing a movie called Justice League Mortal, which was going to be directed by George Miller, and Aquaman was going to be featured as a part of the league, and reportedly, he was going to be played by Santiago Cabrera, which is kind of funny to me because I have the same name as that guy. A guy with my name could have played Aquaman. That's kind of crazy. There's a number of concept art and production design that we have left from the proposed movie, and if we go by this Aquaman design, it seems like maybe they would have adapted his water hand from the comics, which, if you don't know, Aquaman has lost his hand in the comics, and originally he had a hook. But later on in the mid-2000s, he got a magic hand that allowed him control over water. It was honestly a pretty cool power-up. The next reports about a potential solo Aquaman movie came from a 2009 article from THR.com, which reported on the then current state of DC's output on film and all the rumored projects from the time. One of the projects that it reported on was an Aquaman movie that was being worked on by Appian Way, which is Leonardo DiCaprio's production company, but we don't know any directors or actors who might have been considered for the film, and there weren't any further news after this. Another rejected Aquaman project from this time was another movie, but it wasn't going to be live action. It was actually a direct-to-video animated movie that Warner Brothers was considering, but ultimately passed on. And this is a movie that I actually already talked about in another video I made, explaining every single cancelled DC animated movie that we know about. So if you're interested in hearing more about this Aquaman animated movie, I'll leave a link in the description so you can check it out. As we all know though, In the end, we got to see Aquaman finally getting his own live-action movie as a part of the DCEU, with it being officially announced in 2015 as being directed by James Wan and starring Jason Momoa as Aquaman, with it finally releasing in 2018 to an overall positive reception and an amazing performance at the box office. It's literally the highest grossing DC movie of all time, and not only in the DCEU, but DC in general. It made more money than The Dark Knight. It's one of the best performing films ever in general. It's actually really amazing. And it managed to prove that Aquaman's inherent ridiculousness is something that makes the character and his world more rich, charismatic, and entertaining. It wasn't ashamed of being a comic book movie, and it leans into the over-the-top nature of Aquaman comics to make a really good movie in my opinion. Due to this huge financial success, it didn't take long for more Aquaman movie rumors to start popping up. We did eventually get a sequel in 2023, but shortly after the original movie's release, in 2018, there were rumors of another planned DC movie that would have been a spin-off to Aquaman, and it would have focused on the Trench, the deep-sea creatures that appeared in the 2018 movie and originated from the New 52 comics, and it would have had James Wan returning for a more horror story set in Aquaman's world. Years later in 2021, James Wan would further comment on this cancelled movie, revealing that it was actually going to feature Black Manta as its protagonist. And man, the thought of a solo Black Manta movie to me is simply insane. DC should really consider making more villain movies. I'd be kinda sad if they just stopped at Joker. Beyond these undeveloped film projects, back in 2022, Variety reported that HBO Max was developing a live-action series adapting the graphic novel You Brought Me the Ocean by Alex Sanchez and Jewel Moreau, a young adult coming-of-age story focusing on Jackson Hyde, the son of Black Manta and second Aqualad. But there haven't been any further news about this project since then, so who knows if it's still in development. Still though, the OG Garth version of Aqualad did appear in the series Titans, and HBO Max did end up releasing an Aquaman show, but it was animated. Aquaman King of Atlantis is a 3-episode animated miniseries that's honestly pretty good. It's funny and energetic with a unique art style. It was developed by Victor Courtwright and Marley Halpern Gracer, the same people who made Thundercats Roar. And while that show did receive some backlash, their style is undeniably expressive and filled with personality. The show has Aquaman facing against some really entertaining versions of Ocean Master, Fisherman, and the Scavenger. It's worth checking out if you're an Aquaman fan. And the best thing about it is that it has a version of Mera that's actually likable, and that's a good thing. She doesn't look like she would defecate on your bed. Aquaman is a character with a very long history in movies and TV, from being one of the very first comic book characters to get his own TV show, a random, obscure Latin America parody show, and canceled TV pilots, all the way to the character finally getting his own movie and it being one of the most financially successful films of all time. Aquaman has proven to be one of the most iconic superheroes ever. People might make fun of him and they will always make jokes, but the truth is that Aquaman is awesome and he's proven it time and time again. But what do you think about Aquaman? Would you like to see a new Aquaman TV show? Personally, always wanted to see an Aquaman the Animated Series, just like they do for Batman and Superman. I'd like for Warner to adapt Aquaman's greatest storylines and take the best aspects of the character's lore to create something that captures the appeal of Aquaman comics. I think there's a lot of potential there. But please, let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, thank you so much for watching.